My name is Jane Dickey, and I'm the coordinator of this group. Saugatuck area, Douglas Area Indivisible is a local grassroots branch of the national Indivisible movement of millions of everyday people united across differences to build real democracy of, by, and for the people. Together, we resist authoritarianism, fight for progressive policies, and elect leaders who reflect our values. Being a member of this movement includes sharing our message widely, organizing communities, using our power as voters, developing each other's leadership, and bringing more people into our peaceful movement. Through bold and collective action, we're working to make a world for generations to come that is free, equal, and just. At this point in our nation's history, things are happening fast, and our rights are being usurped daily. People feel the need to discuss in an open forum. We need to join with other Saugatuck Douglas area indivisible folk to share thoughts and concerns and to find meaningful action. We have a discussion group to do just that. You can find it on our website. Because we have an organized, effective communicating system through our website and social media, particularly through the work of our web designer and communication coordinator extraordinaire, Erin Wilkinson. No. There you go. Very good. We have become a source of information, announcements, and activism for much of West Michigan and beyond. We have engaged individuals who scan important news and make sure people see what's happening in our nation. We have artists who help engage us in creative protests and communication. We participate with like-minded organizations supporting justice for LGBTQ folks, such as our recent float in the Pride Parade, calling attention to the evident dangers to our democracy and dangers to the health and safety of our neighbors. Thank you, Dawn Stafford and her team of worker bees for creating a clear image representing our need for resistance. And for those of you who missed this beautiful float, you'll see it again at the Saugatuck Douglas 4th of July parade, where Lady Liberty and perhaps other important historical cultural icons will stand boldly to proclaim that we will uphold our Constitution. We support Get Out the Vote efforts and educate the voting public about candidates that represent our values and policy positions. Thank you, Lisa Lenzo, and all of you who have written thousands of postcards already. We show up for protests both locally and in cooperation and coordination with the Holland Zealand Indivisible. Thank you to Flip Milner, who keeps with his safety committee for keeping us peaceful and safe, and to both groups for bringing 5,000 people to Holland, Michigan. Yay! Yay! I feel like Kermit the Frog. Remember when he would? And 5,000 people, unbelievable, with joy and creativity and resolve to proclaim, we will not tolerate kings. Thank you to all who showed up with protest signs and those who helped in sign making. Tonight's meeting brings Dana Nessel to inform us of the actions that Attorneys General and her office in particular are taking to ensure the voices of the people are heard. This is an example of the kind of community work that we do. Thanks to a great deal of coordination by Becky Bruns and Tricia Chase and their working committee, we bring you this evening. Saugatuck Douglas Area Indivisible member Glenna DeYoung will introduce Attorney General Dana Nessel. AG Nessel will offer remarks, after which we will have a question and answer period. If you have questions, some of you have already asked some, thank you. If you have questions at any time, write them on the 3x5 cards and pass them to the outer aisles where someone will pick them up and bring them forward. Many of you know Glenna DeYoung for her local dedication as both an environmental advocate and a local political activist. Glenna co-chaired the committee for the new playground and played an instrumental role in the creation of the Saugatuck Wilds Nature Preserve. In politics, she's been a campaign manager, canvassing trainer, candidate strategist, and fundraiser. What you may not know is that in 2014, Glenna and her wife, Marcia, were the first same-sex couple married in Michigan, thanks to a legal pioneer who happens to be our speaker tonight. Their friendship commenced with a heartfelt phone call from Glenna to Dana, expressing gratitude for the groundbreaking work that enabled their marriage. At Dana's request, Glenna joined the fundraising committee for the National Marriage Challenge, a nonprofit aimed at raising and funding support for ongoing legal battles in Michigan's ruling faced based in the appeals court and then ultimately all the way up to the Supreme Court. So our local heroes were part of what changed our nation for the better, for love, where marriage equality was affirmed nationwide. In 2018, after moving full-time to Saugatuck, Glenna and Marcia held their first ever political fundraiser for Dana as she ran for Michigan's Attorney General and won. They also held another fundraiser in 2022 when Dana won for the second time. Thank you for this important work. Glenna DeYoung will introduce her friend.
Good evening. Marcia and I got here early tonight. If you know us, we're usually the right on time people. And we walked up to the church and saw all these big tents and we said, well, they moved it outside. It must have gotten big. We started talking to people and my friend Don finally said, well, when did you guys join? We said, join what? Oh, the garden club. Oh, wrong church. Okay. Well, good thing we got here early. So while we watch Trump take a wrecking ball to our democracy, many are asking, where is the opposition? Where is Representative Bill Heidinga, who hasn't held a town hall in almost 8 years? Where are the moderate Republicans who were once known for the reasonable approach in Washington, D.C.? Where are the presidential cabinet members who in Trump's first term at least had some modicum of success at tempering him? But you know what we never hear? Where is Michigan's Attorney General? Dana Nessel is always front and center in the fight. She truly is a legal pioneer who championed marriage equality in Michigan a decade ago. As a private attorney, she didn't listen to the naysayers who said such a case couldn't be won in a flyover state. When equality organizations and corporations wouldn't help to fund this legal battle, Dana was undaunted and found help in local Democratic clubs and grassroots advocates. After securing marriage equality in Michigan, she successfully defended the ruling through 2 appeals against challenges by then Attorney General Bill Schuette, eventually winning nationwide marriage equality in 2015 as part of the legal team at the United States Supreme Court. In 2017, Dana sought out candidates to run for Michigan Attorney General to succeed Schuette and ensure that opposition to civil rights didn't continue in this office. When she kept hearing no's from prominent Democrats, she said, screw it, I'll run myself. Were those your exact words? Something like so. As we all know, she won the first term as Michigan's Attorney General in 2018, succeeding the man that she beat in court several times. You know what this is called? Priceless. During her first term, Dana was nationally recognized as a defender of democracy for her work in championing consumer protections, protecting Michigan's presidential election results, ensuring the post office delivered ballots in a timely manner, and making the lawyers who wrongfully sought to overturn our elections accountable through sanctions. In 2022, Dana secured a second term as our Attorney General. Tonight, we will hear directly from her how her office is holding the current administration of the United States accountable to voters and the Constitution. Let's show Dana some West Michigan love.
Oh my gosh, what a
Fabulous welcome. It is so great to be out here. Fair warning, I haven't slept since like January 20th, just about. So I'm I'm a little tired. I actually was a few minutes late because I was actually on the phone with my doctor because I've been trying to find like some medication that'll help me sleep at night. And she said, "Well, what do you think it is?" I'm like, "It might be stress related, I think." I'm not, again, I'm not a doctor, but, and she said, she goes, "Well, have you tried just not watching the news for a while?" And I was like, that would be lovely. But I just don't think that my job is compatible, unfortunately, with that. So I think that's not an option for me. So I want to say this because I think it's important to be said. You know, we need to recognize, obviously, that Donald Trump is the duly elected president of the United States, and he won the popular vote. He won the state of Michigan by some 80,000 votes, and I understand that his policies are popular with some people, and obviously people wanted some of the things that he ran on. He's doing the things he said he was going to do. But that being the case, I also won the state of Michigan, but I won my race by 370,000 votes. So I think if anybody has a mandate here, it might be me and not him. But I say, in all honesty, I understand. Again, you have the right as the president of the United States to advance your agenda, but you have to do it legally. That's the thing, right? And every president since Marbury v. Madison, for those of you that remember that case back in 1803, it just is essentially said the executive branch is subject to judicial scrutiny by the courts. And you have to obey the laws of this nation, and you have to obey the Constitution. And if and when you don't, you can be sued and be held accountable. And what I've tried to do is this. I mean, I've tried to be circumspect, and there are only limited times when I bring a lawsuit, even though I know it doesn't seem like it. But those times that you bring a lawsuit, it is when, firstly, the executive branch has violated the law. And it could be, again, it could be a provision of the Constitution. It could be federal law. It could be the Administrative Procedures Act. It could be a lot of different things. And then secondly, that it has caused a concrete, specific injury either to the state of Michigan or the people of the state of Michigan, thereby providing something that we know as standing to sue in court. And so at this juncture, Michigan, on behalf of my department, has sued 18 times. We've now sued the federal government. We have filed over 20 amicus briefs in support of other parties that have sued the federal government, and there's been over 300 lawsuits filed against the federal government. You might be wondering how much this has cost the state. How much has it cost our department to file all these lawsuits? Well, I have a specific number for you: $5,442. And the reason why I have that number is because we didn't hire any additional staff. I just have, unlike what you hear about public servants from the federal government who disparages their federal workers, I, on the other hand, believe I have the greatest staff in the world working at the Michigan Department of Attorney General, and some of the hardest working lawyers and paralegals and special agents and support staff. And they work nights, they work weekends, and this entire cost is just the pro hoc vici motions that we have to file in order to be able to argue cases in other courts around the country to get admitted there in order to file. So that's the cost. On the other hand, we have saved the state of Michigan well over $750 million in our lawsuits. So I think it's a pretty good trade-off, I would say. So when I first started doing these, I would go through every lawsuit, and now I would need like, I don't know, 12 hours, it feels like, to go through all of those. But I wanted to make sure that the public could see exactly what it was we were doing and could keep track of each and every lawsuit and where it was at in the courts, and any decisions that had come down. So you can follow that at mi.gov/AG federal actions. So if you just go to it's front and center on our website, but it does allow you to see what exactly it is that we're doing. And so far, we've received injunctive relief in about half of these lawsuits. And we've not lost any lawsuits yet. The injunctive relief basically means that a court has determined that we are A, likely to be successful on the merits of the case, and B, that there will be irreparable immediate injury if the relief is not granted right away. And that's a pretty significant thing. Most cases, you're not going to get a preliminary injunction. You're certainly not going to get a temporary restraining order, which is something that you normally get before you get even a PI. But we've got them in a lot of cases because there's been a determination by at least one court, if not several courts, that the actions of the federal government are incredibly injurious to the state of Michigan, the people of the state of Michigan, and then my colleague AGs that have filed along with me. And I want to describe that process a little bit so that people sort of understand. It was actually, it was over a year ago. It was February of 2024. And I was at an event with my Democratic AG colleagues. And we meet fairly regularly. And very, very candidly, you got your swing state AGs, and then you got your deep blue state AGs. And sometimes, like, I talk to my blue state AGs, and they don't really know what goes on in places like Michigan, a truly purple state. And anyway, we were talking about the election, and I said to them really candidly, I said, you guys, I don't think that Joe Biden's going to win Michigan this time around. I have a strong feeling he's not going to. And they kind of looked at me like I was crazy. And I was like, no, for real. I think Trump may win Michigan this time. And it was just the feeling that I had. And a lot of, whether it was what we were seeing on social media or things, that you just kind of heard on the ground. And we all sort of agreed that a second Trump presidency was going to be, in many ways, a lot worse, given the fact that there were already so many things that Trump was saying that he intended to do. And of course, he laid out a roadmap for us in Project 2025. And I said, I think we have to start getting prepared for that now. We didn't know what the events would be over the course of the summer. There would be another candidate or any of the rest of it. But I just said, we have to do a little bit more to be prepared and to look through what's in Project 2025 and to hear the things that Trump has been talking about as he's been out campaigning on the stump, and be ready for it. And so my colleagues and I tried to put together a little bit of a plan in the event that happened, hoping for the best, but planning for the worst. And I have to say, I feel like what we've seen is so over the top in terms of what we even could have anticipated or expected. And I think for a lot of people who voted for President Trump, they're getting a lot of things that they didn't expect either. And I look at some of the things that happened very, very quickly, and some of the ways that federal government is being destroyed from the inside out, that I think people are aghast at. And, like our very first case, right, involved birthright citizenship, which had been such settled law that it wasn't seriously debated. I mean, it's actually written in part of the 14th Amendment. I mean, it's there in black and white. We've had 2 Supreme Court decisions that have affirmed that. And we know exactly what the intention was when that was, ratified by, 35 of the states. And so when that came out as, one of the first executive orders, I was like, oh my gosh, like that's pretty crazy because again, it is such settled law, but it was instructive to me in that like there's kind of nothing that we shouldn't be prepared for. Even the fact that the pardoning of over 1,500 people who mounted an insurrection at the Capitol and who attacked, police officers and all the rest. I mean, it was so extreme in nature. Even though he had promised it, you didn't think he was really going to do it until he did, right? So I was like, wow, we just have to be prepared for literally anything. And, in that birthright lawsuit, I mean, immediately a judge right away halted that from going into effect, understanding like you're creating all over the country these stateless children that belong nowhere. They don't have a country of origin in that case, and also cost the states a lot of money. But right away, a Reagan appointee said, I've been on the bench for 30 years, and I've never seen such a flagrant violation of the Constitution as what is contained in this order. But that was just like the first of what was to come. And you remember shortly after that, the acting director of the Office of Management and Budget put out a memo just saying like, we're going to put a pause on basically all funding that goes from the federal government to the states, which in the case of the state of Michigan is 42% of our budget. And it was insane. Literally, it came out one night. The next morning, you had a total halt to funding for our most essential programs, Medicaid and FEMA and Head Start and Meals on Wheels, and just the list, of course, goes on and on and on. It happened so quickly that even the federal agencies that administer those programs didn't even know about it, if you can imagine that. And of course, there's no effort to advise the state agencies or the participants in the programs or anything, which is like, that's not how governments should treat people, right? For anything, whether it's a grant, whether it's any kind of funding that is part of our budget, like you get fair notice and warning if your grant is going to end and if it's not going to be renewed. That's normally how things work. In the case of this funding, this is money that's appropriated by, I just want you to yell it out. If there is a body, it is legislative in nature. It is also in Washington, D.C., and it's supposed to have a function. Does anyone know what this body is called? Just yell it out. Congress. Congress is supposed to serve as a check on the executive, right? Not just the courts. Article 1, the very first article. But, so you had this budget that had been formulated and passed by Congress and approved by the president. And to have this new president say like, you know what? I don't care for that budget. I'm just going to go ahead and decide that I'm not going to relay any of the money that was appropriated that everybody expected they would have for this fiscal year. And I'm just going to stop all of it, which is like an insane thing to do. But yet it actually happened. And, we had to file a lawsuit immediately because you can imagine the harm done to the state. So we actually, all 23 Democratic AGs within 24 hours filed this lawsuit we right away got a TRO, and the judge was like, you have to, discontinue the pause and reimplement funding of these critical programs. But I just thought, like, what a brazen way to circumvent the separation of powers. And also, folks in Congress, you ain't mad about this? Like, you're the ones who did that, including, a Republican House. That's you having appropriated it. And now to have the executive say, like, I don't have to do that. I do what I want. But unfortunately, not enough Republican members of Congress seemingly very worried about that. And it was just sort of astonishing to me. But what happened in that case has happened in many of these cases, which is just the acting director just withdrew the memo and said, our bad, never mind. And I mean, it's just a crazy, like, that's so disruptive. It's not how your federal government should operate. Anyway, we have had case after case after case after case, and so many that it's hard to talk about them individually. I will say that there are many efforts that you sort of see the same recurring theme, which is, I don't like that government agency, so I am going to just abolish that government agency, even though it's a congressionally created agency. So I don't like the Department of Education, even though I appointed that wrestling lady to head up the DOE. But I just don't want to have it anymore. I'm going to get rid of it. Or like, just, I don't like the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, which of course was created in the wake of the last recession. I don't, hundreds of thousands of people that this helps recoup their money when they've been scammed or defrauded. I don't like it. I'm just going to get rid of it. And really the list goes on. And again, that's not how our government works. You can get rid of those agencies. It's not as though it's impossible to do, but you need to have a majority in the House and Senate to do it. And then the president can sign that. But, it's just an effort to circumvent Congress altogether. And probably because you're not going to get it passed through Congress. And I think there's an understanding of that. So what the president has tried to do is to legislate via Sharpie, essentially, and to sign all these executive orders. And I think it's hard for people to understand this unless they, I don't know, took a civics class one time in, high school. But, that's not how legislation happens. And I know people get really scared when they see these executive orders, but an executive order doesn't have the force of law. Laws have the force of law. And so that's one of the reasons why so many of these lawsuits have been so successful in the courts, because President Trump isn't even trying to do this stuff the legal way. He oftentimes could if he wanted to, but he's not made an effort. That may change with the new budget, but you're already seeing that a lot of the things he wants, there's a lot of heartburn by members of Congress. And now that you've seen things move from the House to the Senate, it doesn't look like a lot of the things that the president wanted to happen might ultimately happen. But I want to say this, not talking about, we'll see, right? Pressure is the only thing that really works, besides, of course, our lawsuits. But there's just a couple of things to talk about here. First of all, the great importance of people standing up and saying this isn't right. And, whether you are a company at a business that's affected, whether you run some sort of an agency or a nonprofit, no matter who you are, if you are affected by this, what we've seen is a lot of folks feel like, I can't say anything about this. I hate it. It's incredibly injurious to myself or to the people that I work with or the people I serve, but I can't say anything because then there'll be a target on my back. But that's really just the opposite. I mean, that's exactly, I think, what the administration wants, is for people to be so afraid that they do and say nothing. But firstly, as I always say, and I said this about the marriage equality case, you can't win a case you don't file. And many of these cases, again, have been very successful. But also the other thing that seems to work is when people complain a whole lot. And I can give you example after example after example of the administration backing down. And you've seen that time and again. I think there's a phrase for it now, taco, isn't that right? I mean, but it's sort of true, right? And you remember when at the very beginning, we saw, of course, the defunding of all kinds of programs, including the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative. And, when we saw the abolition of the sea lamprey mitigation program, I thought to myself, who here voted for more sea lamprey? Like, is there anybody that has ever seen a sea lamprey and be like, you know what the Great Lakes is missing? More of those, please. But people complained and they ended up restoring the program, right? Social Security, we were prepared to file a lawsuit against the Social Security Administration because they had made a number of changes that were about to be implemented, including the fact that you had to do everything in person, you couldn't do anything online, and many other changes. And people complain and complain, and then they walk that back. And you've seen it happen over and over again. I want to, for a second, take the law firms that Trump was trying to strong arm into all kinds of agreements. And what you saw happen was this: the firms that agreed and signed some sort of an agreement with the administration saying, I'll do 100 million hours of or $100 billion worth of pro bono legal work for the administration in exchange for still being able to enter government buildings, which was insane to me. Well, what happened? The law firms that engaged in those settlements ended up losing half their clients because everybody thought, God, if you can't stand up for yourself, how are you going to be a good advocate for me in court? Right? So you had like the best and the brightest lawyers left those firms, their clients left. It was the firms that stood up and won easily in court. And they're the ones now who are handling cases for the firms that lost those clients. And many of the best lawyers from those firms, again, went to those other firms that fought back. And I say that to just sort of demonstrate that there is power in asserting yourself, whether, again, you're standing up so that you are a declarant in a lawsuit and filing that lawsuit, or whether you are standing up and saying this is wrong and complaining about it enough that finally the administration backs off. The worst thing you can do is to say nothing. That is when you definitely are going to lose whatever it is that you are trying so hard to preserve. And I want to use a few examples because I think it's important. But, I look at the situation with the tariffs, right? You see this time and again. A common theme is that the Trump administration will manufacture an emergency and then use that excuse for an emergency to issue an order that you could never otherwise obtain. And then under that emergency law, issue some sort of directive. And on the tariff cases, the AGs that filed those lawsuits in the International Court of Trade, they almost immediately got a ruling in their favor saying that these tariffs are illegal and that there was no real fentanyl emergency with Canada that you had to impose, tariffs on them. But I did not participate in that case. And you know why I didn't? Because I couldn't get Michigan companies on board to issue declarations about what harms they were suffering. I couldn't get Ford or GM or Stellantis to say, we want to help you with this lawsuit, because they were afraid of being targeted by the president. And so what happened? Relief was granted, at least temporarily, to those other states that filed. And so I think there is a lesson to be learned by that when you capitulate to a bully, which is really what Trump has been. Not fighting back is the worst thing that you can do. And I will say, and I'm going to add something else, our NIH cases. The second iteration of that, which was just successful today, but I was one of the lead states on that effort by the Trump administration to limit the grants that had been negotiated by the federal government. They're the ones who entered into these agreements about direct costs and indirect costs and all the rest. And of course, our universities relied on that. Our hospital systems relied on that. And then all at once, hundreds of millions of dollars that would be drained out of, all of the people that were, involved in the medical research, or that, patients that were receiving that treatment. Really important programs that would just go by the wayside. But I could only get so many universities to sign on and be a declarant in those cases, because they were so afraid that their future grants would be targeted. Now, I won that case. And almost immediately, NIH withdrew and said, all right, we're not going to do that anymore. We're going to follow through with these grants that had already been, issued long before. But my point is this: the worst thing you can do is to back down. And this is going to bring up one other case that I have to talk about right now, especially being where I am today. And it involves the J.H. Campbell coal plant run by Consumers Energy. Just insane that you would have a coal plant that for years the plan was to decommission that coal plant. And it's not just because, as we know, coal is the dirtiest form of energy. It's not just because of that. It just wasn't efficient for Consumers Energy anymore. And they had replaced it with a natural gas plant. So, for years, you were going to be decommissioning this plant. And 8 days before it was scheduled to be closed, an emergency order comes down from the federal government saying, you can't close that plant now. You have to keep it open for at least another 90 days as under that act, because there's a state of emergency as it applies to our energy needs in Michigan. Well, both Consumers Energy and the Public Service Commission in Michigan said, wait, what? There is no emergency when it comes to meeting our energy needs. And this does happen from time to time when you have really bad winter storms, or in the South when they have hurricanes. Every once in a while, they will issue an emergency order because of that set of circumstances, because they are having issues with the grid, or they are having issues with being able to provide enough energy. But consumers were like, we don't actually know what you're talking about, right? Well, as it turns out now here you have a plant. They have no more coal at this coal plant. So to operate it, you'd actually have to purchase coal at a very high price from other states and then ship it in. Nobody practically was working at that plant anymore. All the workers had left or were almost gone. And now estimates could be, it's tens of millions of dollars to keep that open even for a short period of time. And guess who's going to have to pay for that? The ratepayers. Consumers not going to take that hit. We're going to have to pay for that. So here, the president, he promised us that price of goods and services would go down. And instead, our utility bills are going to skyrocket because he's so married or tethered to the idea that you have to use coal and you can't use cleaner forms of energy, even when it's best for consumers. And I don't mean consumers' energy, I mean actual us consumers and ratepayers to do that. So it's just this theme that you see over and over again. But I guess what I want to say is this: standing up matters. It makes a difference, and it's the only thing that does. And I look at those, all the people across this country, the millions and millions of people that participated in the No Kings events. How many of you guys were there on Saturday? Like everybody who's here practically. I went to 3 in Saginaw County and Bay County and Midland County. And, you know, it was tremendous to see all those people that were out there standing up and saying that this is not right. This is not how our government ought to operate. And we want a president who abides by the law. And honestly, just the cruelty of our government right now in the way that it treats its citizens and the people who reside here, the people who long to come here. I don't recognize this America anymore. It's not the America that I grew up in, and it's not the America that my grandparents fled war-torn Europe to get away from fascism. They moved here because they wanted to live in a democracy. And we are sliding so quickly into full-blown fascism. I truly, honestly believe that. And I don't think I'm using hyperbole. I don't think I'm being overly dramatic when I say that. But that's not how the story has to end. And we can be the heroes of our own story here. The only true way to stop fascism is to stand up and to have your voice be heard and to peacefully, lawfully protest the government. And when the numbers are large enough, what ultimately I believe will happen is, I think that eventually, it's taken a little while, but I think Congress will turn on the president eventually. Obviously, we have elections coming up next year, but I don't know at the rate we're going right now that if we don't stand up as strongly as we can, that we're going to have free and fair elections. And that's why we can't wait until 2026 to make sure that Congress can really be a check on the executive. We have to be as active as we can be right now. And the more people that stand up and the more people who peacefully protest and say, you know, I am not okay with this. And the more that the president's poll numbers start to drop, and the more that members of Congress think to themselves, I am not long for that seat anymore if I don't do more to protect my constituents, the people I'm supposed to be representing, instead of just representing the interests of President Trump. And, you know, we've seen that time and time again, and I can't understand. I'll just use this example. When we filed the NIH lawsuit, it was so strange to me because the state that seemed to be impacted the greatest by it was actually Alabama, because they received such for their population, such an incredible amount of money from the NIH, and the University of Alabama is their biggest employer. And I just thought, like, where's the AG of Alabama joining our lawsuit? Where's Steve Marshall? And he was nowhere to be seen because it was more important for him to, you know, continue to have his loyalty to the president than to represent the people that he got elected by. And I think that as time goes on more and more, I hope that people in Congress will stand up and say, I'm not okay with this. And eventually, depending on how crazy things get, maybe they will consider actually removing him from office, which again is something that Congress actually has the power to do. But at the very least, they can stop some of the worst actions that we're seeing from happening, and the courts can as well. But none of it happens without all of you continuing to stand up and to be strong, to have your voice heard, to not hide, to not do what my doctor suggested, which is to never watch the news. I'm not saying that you have to watch it all day, every day, but you do have to keep informed and consistently talking to your friends and your family and your neighbors and people at your church and people, I mean, everywhere, talking about these actions. And you don't have to denigrate the president. You just have to say, did you know that DHHS is eliminating, X percentage of CDC labs that test for bird flu, labs that test for smallpox and measles, labs that test for Ebola. I personally would not like to die from a disease that causes me to bleed out of my eyeballs. How about you? Did you vote for an infectious disease that causes you to bleed out of your eyeballs? And then maybe they'll say, now that you mention it, I too would prefer not to die from a disease where maybe I bleed out of my eyeballs, especially one that can be prevented if we have a functional CDC and a functional DHHS. So those are the kinds of conversations that, I feel like are impactful to people, just having those talks so that people understand how these issues impact them. And trust me when I say there is not a person in this church, there is not a person in this state, there is not a person in America that is not impacted by these actions. And I don't care if you are Betsy DeVos, right? You could be a millionaire, you could be a billionaire. You're still going to get Ebola. I mean, I'm just being very honest. Like many of these things, there's no escaping that. If we are not testing for it, if we are not engaging in preventative measures, you cannot escape that. That is something that will come to you eventually. And that's why I don't understand when you have, mass layoffs at the FAA, and like, don't you also want to have air traffic controllers make sure that your plane doesn't crash? Like I never considered that to be a democratic issue. I was like, everyone should be anti-planes crashing. We should all be able to come together behind like safe air travel. And I'll give you another example with NOAA. The defunding, you heard the weather forecaster in Florida saying he's not going to be able to accurately predict the strength of hurricanes anymore. And that maybe, your weather app that you have on your phone, you're just not going to know anymore if it's going to rain or there'll be a storm. I don't know anybody who's like, screw my weather app. I hate that thing. I just want to be surprised. That predictability of it, it's weather has lost all its fun for me. It's not a challenge anymore because I just already know. I mean, these are things that I think are really impactful, and they're conversations that you have to have even when it's hard. And even if, like me, you have relatives on, for some reason, both sides of your family that really believe in the things that that the president campaigned on, but also that he says he stands for. There are all these other things that I don't think they expected to happen, but they are incredibly harmful. And I think it's a matter of, even when it's uncomfortable, sitting down, having those conversations and saying, here's how it is going to affect us. And it's not just having those conversations with them, it's sharing it all on your social media. It's going to your, county commission or your city commission meetings. And for the 3 minutes that you have at the beginning or at the end of the meeting to, engage in public comment, to say, hey, did you know about the fact that we're maybe going to have a disease where you bleed out of your eyeballs? Here's what's happening at the DHHS. Here's the lab that they shut down. That's the lab that is in the Midwest region that tests for Ebola. We're not going to be able to do that anymore. Here's why we can't test for E. coli anymore. Here's why we can't test for Legionnaire's disease anymore. Just things that, like, no one wants those things, but we're not going to be able necessarily to know about it or to prevent it. Those conversations are incredibly important to have. So, these are a lot of lawsuits, so I can't possibly go through all of them, but I will tell you that, my goal is to continue holding this administration accountable when they violate the law and when they hurt the people of our state. And candidly, even though I didn't expect I was going to have to do this twice, that's what I ran on. That's what I initially ran on, was making sure that people were protected from the federal government when they engaged in illegal activity and trespassed on the rights and the protections of the people of our state. And I guess for the rest of my term, that's what I'm going to keep on doing. But I hope that you'll understand that lawsuits only go so far if you don't have the support of the people. And that's where all of you come in, whether or not you have a law degree, or whether or not you've ever run for office, it doesn't matter. Your voice matters, and it matters now more than it ever has. So I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to all of you and to come out here and have this conversation. And I will say, I have been at many events where, people don't necessarily agree with me, and they don't have to agree with me. But I think at the end of the day, like I said, I stood before the Appropriations Committee and the Judicial Committees in the House and the Senate, and I went through all the cases, and I talked about how much money our cases had saved the state. And the Republican chair of Judiciary was like, yes, that's probably really good that you did that. And I was like, thank you. Now, if you could not totally defund my budget, that would be great as well. But my point is, at the end of the day, I think when you actually see and hear the work that we're doing, you understand that it's really the Republican AGs that are not standing up for these things, who I think people in their respective states should probably be the most upset with. I'm going to say one last thing, and then I will stop, and we can go to questions. But I do want to talk about the birthright citizenship case. It did, you may have heard, go to the Supreme Court, not on the merits of the case, though. Really, it was about when a lawsuit is filed, whether or not there can be national injunctive relief granted, or can that relief just be limited to the states that filed the lawsuit? And what more and more courts are saying is, if you are not participating in that lawsuit, you are not going to get the relief that's granted. And so that's why it's more important than ever that my office be as busy and active as we can be, because in a lot of these cases, what you're going to see is it's only going to be those plaintiff states that end up getting whatever the benefit of those rulings are in court, and the other states are going to be left behind and left out of that court ruling. So that's how a lot of courts have perceived this. We'll see what the Supreme Court says. I don't know how they can do it on birthright citizenship. I don't know how it's like, if you're born in this state, you're a citizen, but then if you drive across the border, you're not. If you get, depending on where you were delivered as a child, or where you were able to go when you went into labor. But that seems like an odd one. But for many of these other ones, you'll understand that there can be relief that is only granted to certain states. So that's something to watch out for. But it's probably a reason why you're going to see more lawsuits than ever coming from the Department of Attorney General. So I don't know. I don't know what time we were getting started on the questions, but I'm happy to take questions. Yeah, and I just want to say how much I appreciate all of you guys. This has been, I think this is a tough time for all of us, but especially those of us in elected office. And I'll say for myself in particular, there's a lot of times when I kind of feel a little bit like I'm standing off by myself, and I don't have the support of the people, or I don't have the support of my party. I'm just doing what I think is best and what I think is right. And so to get affirmation from you guys means more than you can possibly imagine. And I just want to thank you guys all for that.
So we have quite a few questions, but in fact, you have answered a number of the questions that people had written down, so I appreciate that. One of the questions just begins with, thank you for what you and other Democratic AGs have done with the lawsuits against Trump administration, and is asking your advice of how do we persuade other Dems to be as proactive? So these are people who would be with us as Democrat. We're not talking about the Republican, folk leaning Republican. We're talking about Democrats. How do we persuade them?
Yeah, I mean, I get that this is a scary time, and I get that nobody wants to be targeted. And when I say targeted, like I actually mean targeted. Not just that, you know, the president will say demeaning things about you that might inspire somebody to commit acts of violence against you, which, I mean, if we didn't think that was happening before, we certainly see over the course of the weekend that there are some people that take his words pretty seriously. And I can understand that. I can, you know, also I can understand the feeling of like, well, this is what the people voted for, so let's give them what they want. But we all took an oath to serve, and we still are required to do what we think is best for our constituents on a, you know, individual basis. But I think that to have the attitude that like we're all going to try to get along, and, you know, I am going to say or do things that to me personally normalizes this president by saying like, this is a person I can work with. This is a person whose word can be counted on. I think what it does is it just sort of sends a message to everybody like, he's not so bad. This is fine. And I look at some of the things that are happening, for instance, that you know we've not seen historically. The federalizing of the National Guard, for instance, in Los Angeles. I mean, that is such an extreme response to call in, not just to federalize the National Guard, but to bring in the Marines, to bring in military and have the military policing our streets. That's actually a police state. And is it illegal? It is unconstitutional. That is not how the law is supposed to work at all. And it is a scary, dangerous set of circumstances. When you see members of ICE that are fully masked and not necessarily marked, just literally disappearing people off the streets of the United States, that's fascism. And to me, when you say, yeah, but I can still work with this guy, he's cool, that presents to me a set of circumstances as a Democrat where when you have somebody who's trying to undo everything that you've ever fought for your entire life, your entire career, it's not the same as when you're working with other Republicans that I have worked with in the past who, by the way, you know, they support the rule of law. They are people who probably don't want to see, you know, the president taking a $400 million plane from Qatar or making billions of dollars off of crypto or, you know, tennis shoes, or what was the latest thing I just saw today? Cell phones, right? I mean, he's monetized the presidency in a way that if anybody else ever did this, people would be aghast in horror. And somehow we just sort of accept it now that that's how the presidency runs. And so when you take a person who's engaged in this kind of conduct and you treat him like, hey, I'm going to negotiate a deal with him because he is a good faith actor and I can rely on him to keep his word, I think it sends the wrong message. And I do think this is a time as Democrats that we have to be united. We have to present a united front against Donald Trump because he's not a regular president. And I got to tell you, I've been around for a few years now. I'm older than some of you, younger than others, but I remember Ronald Reagan's presidency, and I remember, George Herbert Walker Bush's presidency, and I remember George W. Bush's presidency, and this ain't any of those. I mean, so when we react as though the things that we're seeing President Trump do in office that's just the normal behavior of any other Republican in office. And so we have to, negotiate, and we have to, I just can't do it, man. I don't know what to say. I wake up in horror. I go to sleep in horror. I don't really sleep, as I've indicated multiple times now. But each and every day, I just feel like, what fresh hell is this? And I can't pretend otherwise because, for one thing, I'm a lawyer. And the things that I'm saying, I've just never, ever seen anybody else do, including, and I think this is important to say, because I've never seen a president say or do this before Donald Trump, to say, I don't know if I have to follow the Constitution or abide by it, which is something he actually said, to disparage the courts and to say that's just a low-level district court judge. And to me, I'm like, man, you appointed some of these people. Some of these are your actual appointees. P.S., for those of you non-lawyers out there, don't ever call a federal district court judge a low-level judge. They don't care for that. But to say that it's discretionary in any way, shape, or form to abide by a court order is something I've never heard any president say before, and it is incredibly dangerous to our democracy. And we can't treat that as though it's anybody else, and we can't normalize that. And I think that we all have to band together as Democrats, but also independents and Republicans too should stand up and say, hey, I wouldn't have been okay if Joe Biden had flouted court orders. There were times where he was sued, certainly multiple times, by the Republican attorneys general, and sometimes they won in court. And you know what Joe Biden did? He was like, okay, and he abided by the court order because he respected the law. But when I see, it's, among the many, many other things, like I said, I have to go back to him doing these quid pro quos for pardons, where literally it doesn't matter what kind of criminal activity you engaged in. It doesn't matter if you feel any remorse. It doesn't matter if you've ever paid restitution to your victims. It doesn't matter how much time you've served or how little, as long as, the president is getting something out of it, either politically or from a messaging standpoint, or maybe he's actually getting something financially out of it, he will literally just toss out any criminal investigation, prosecution, or conviction. And I have to tell you that, talking to my Republican friends who work for the Department of Justice, who work for U.S. attorneys' offices in either the Eastern or the Western District, or my contacts in the FBI, they're horrified. And they don't know how to do their jobs anymore. Because can you imagine waking up in the morning and saying, this is a person who has taken advantage of people and has defrauded thousands of people, seniors, out of their money. But I don't know if at any moment this person is going to, make a huge donation to the president, and then my investigation will just be scrapped and none of this will even matter. like how demoralizing that is. I mean, again, could you imagine any other president engaging in this kind of conduct? And that's the other thing to say. Sorry, just train of thought on this, but to say, you know, for any of these things, like, are you honestly telling me that you're okay with taking the Eric Adams investigation and prosecution and literally tossing it out because you got something in exchange for that, which they literally indicated, you let me go into, you know, your systems in New York City, whether it is, you know, your electronic files or whether it's the jails, you let me find out who's undocumented so that I can deport those people. And I will literally throw out this substantial case that FBI agents and prosecutors spent years and years and years building against him. Can you honestly tell me that you're okay with that? And I'd like to hear what people say in response, because I can't imagine anyone saying, like, that sounds fair. It sounds like a good trade. I like that deal, right? That's not justice. So there's a really long, rambling way of me saying that we cannot, you know, we cannot treat President Trump the way that we have treated or considered other presidents. This is so much different, and it's so much worse. It's so scary, and it's emblematic of a democracy that is in a death spiral. So I cannot, I simply cannot tolerate the thought of not speaking up and speaking out and using literally the bully pulpit each and every opportunity that I can to speak out on these issues that I consider to be so incredibly dangerous to us as the American people.
Thank you. Yeah, lots of waving. People in front don't know the people in the back. There we go. Okay. There are two questions here that pertain more toward things happening within our state. And I'm not sure what a lot of your work that you've outlined here has been the resistance to the fascism of the Trump administration. But voting rights and not ensuring that all people have the right to vote is something within the state. Our democracy, reading the question, works best when all eligible voters participate and have their voices heard. What's being done to ensure voters are not suppressed and that all votes are counted here in Michigan? That was number one. And let me give you a second one, because it also pertains with what's just happened in Lansing. And that is about the recent budget, which significantly cuts the special funding for Michigan schools. So those are two, but they're both in the state. And I wonder what the AG's office does for within the state kinds of things.
Well, let's just start with elections. As you probably remember, quite some time ago now, I don't know, every day is like a year, so it's hard for me to keep track. But there was another executive order that was signed by the president that basically, you know, he sought to undermine the state's ability to regulate time, place, manner of elections. And again, that is within the purview of each state constitutionally. And, you know, we made a lot of progress in Michigan on voting rights in terms of making it more accessible, making sure that everybody could cast their ballot. And, you know, we, the people here in Michigan, and I know many of you in this room were probably involved with those ballot proposals back in 2018 and then again in 2022. And it's because of that we have 9 days of early voting and no reason absentee voting. And if you are serving in the military abroad, you have more time to get your ballot in. I mean, lots of things that we did to ensure that people were not disenfranchised and that it wasn't so difficult to vote. So for the president then to come in and to sign an executive order and to say, well, forget all that. I've decided that I'm going to impose the following restrictions on everyone. Antithetical to everything that, you know, we believe in terms of how federalism works and how our elections work. And of course, the 10th Amendment, remember that? States' rights. So we filed a lawsuit and we just recently got a preliminary injunction on that lawsuit, saying that none of those changes can go into effect. And I mean, there's no way I would say, I'd never say never. I just don't see how we lose that lawsuit. So, that's something that obviously we're doing, but that there are other things that I think are really scary. And there have been a lot of folks at like CISA that were laid off, the cybersecurity experts that work with our state and local election clerks and our county clerks and our local clerks, and protect us from all kinds of efforts by foreign actors to interfere with our elections. And I think it was day one that like a third of those folks were just laid off all at once. And I think the message is like, thanks, Russia, more of that, please. I mean, that's I think the goal is to allow as much foreign interference in our elections as possible. That's in effect what it does. So, we are trying to fight back at some of these changes. Some of these changes, of course, are efforts that are in the state, and you probably know that there's efforts afoot both in the legislature, and that ballot proposals have been authorized by the State Board of Canvassers, and it's going to be up to all of us to vote to make sure that if those make the ballot, that we're not losing essential rights that we worked really hard to secure. But in terms of the school budget, yeah, I mean, that's what we have a state legislature and a governor for, is for them to negotiate that budget. That is, I think you're referring to what we saw come out of the House. Certainly that's not the Senate's budget. And, you need the Senate, the House, and the governor all together to form a budget. I will tell you this, have deep concerns about whether or not the plan really is just to shut down state government. Obviously, the new fiscal year begins in October 1st. They theoretically were supposed to have a budget in place by July 1st, and that's why it's so important for the schools, so that they can plan for when kids go back to school in the fall. It doesn't appear as though we're going to see that happen. I will tell you, can anybody guess what the House's proposed budget is for the Department of Attorney General? $0.00. That is their proposed budget for my department. That again represents all of the state agencies and most of the state actors. It is a recipe for bankruptcy. To know you can sue the state and there will be nobody to defend the state because you completely defunded the office. If you really care about saving the state money, let me suggest this: fully fund the Department of Attorney General. But my concern is that it's the disruption that I think the speaker is most interested in, and not necessarily good government. And we'll have to see what happens between the House and the Senate and the governor, and what they're able to do or not do. But certainly the budgets that they've proposed so far in the House, I don't know if they're just trying to scare people or if that's their true intention. And they're maybe they're lowballing, and then they're going to, the Senate is going to go high, and this is a negotiating tactic. I don't know, but I would really recommend that everybody keep their eye on it. And I would say this: none of us should want to see our state government shut down. I promise you that's not good for anybody.
So I'm going to give you one more question before we're wrapping up. And you put a wonderful list on one of your screens that talked about the things we can do. And it listed all these wonderful things that we should do. And I think second from the bottom was, don't lose a sense of joy. And so my question to you is a personal one. What brings you joy?
I would say mostly my joy comes from Sunday nights at 9 p.m. on the TLC channel. If you've not seen 90 Day Fiance, then I suggest you're missing out. And if when you watch it, you don't tend to question your life choices as much. But I think, I mean, for me personally, sometimes just me and my wife will watch the dumbest television shows we can possibly find to completely disconnect, at least for an hour or two. And, yeah, I mean, it can't be gloom and doom all the time. These are really dark times. There's no question. But what I think excites me, and again, I mean, Saturday was probably the happiest day that I've had in a really long time. And it was just seeing all of these people, in the face of this military birthday parade, watching all the people in cities and towns, large and small, all across Michigan and all across the United States stand up and say, we are not okay with this. No kings. That's not what we signed up for. And we want our country to stay a democracy. And there are so many things about America that make this country so great. We don't want to lose those things. We want to preserve what truly makes America great. And it ain't a birthday military parade in Washington, D.C. So seeing everybody out there standing united, standing together, that's what America's about, And I think we should feel really good that at least for the time being, we still have the opportunity to protest our government. Not everybody is that lucky, but we are by design. And we have our First Amendment rights. We ought to continue to exercise them.
So I wanted, waving hands, see all those people. We're actually gonna stand up and wave our hands in a minute. I want to thank you, Dana Nessel, for your tireless advocacy to ensure the will of the voters is upheld. You've brought us up to date on key issues. You've answered our questions with integrity and honesty. We are better informed and more eager than ever to support our state and our country as we seek to preserve our democratic republic. Thank you. Now we can, yay.
Thank you to all of you. My appreciation to everybody. Thank you for putting this on.
And before you go, just don't go away. Wait a minute. We have John Helmrich has a little gift. Well, it's kind of a big basket of gifts, but anyway, here he comes.
We're honored to present this to our fabulous Attorney General, who's been such a supporter of this community and has been here many times in the last few years. Everything in this basket is from Saugatuck. Some things were made here, some things were grown here or brewed here or whatever. Even the gift card was made in Saugatuck. So it's our appreciation for everything you're doing for everyone in Michigan. We hope you stick around. I know that was a sobering speech, but there was some hope. And I deal with that same issue with my husband every day. I can't be doom and gloom. Oh, anyway. Wow. Hey, I'm glad it's only 3 of you. There's a few better things out. Anyway, as I said, it's heavy. You want me to carry it somewhere for me?
One last word to you all.
Thank everyone for being here.
Before you all admit your guilty pleasures. I want to invite all of you to participate in our work in the upcoming actions and events, which are posted on our website, Saugatuck Douglas Area Indivisibles.org. And if you're able to make a financial contribution as you leave or on our website, we encourage you to do so. As you leave, there are folk there that can help you to do that. You're all welcome to attend our next large meeting here at First Congregational Church at 7 p.m. on July 10. And I want to thank Sarah Turlow, Reverend Sarah Turlow, and the First Congregational Church for hosting us. And I just want to say, in the light of the white Christian nationalism, which is so horrendous, it has been several of the churches in this community that stepped forward to want to host us. So it just that feels very good. And so finally, good night, travel safely as you act up and speak up and uphold the will of the people. Thank you.